For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
Hey, welcome back to Dunkin' Donuts. If we are in fact in Dunkin' Donuts, we
are live in Dunkin'
yes,
Donuts.
and we beamed into Dunkin' Donuts. Russ, look over there.
Ooh, who is that?
It's a famous game designer.
Is that the designer of Space Cadets in the corner?
It's indeed.
Wow, it's Geoff Engelstein.
Geoff Engelstein, Jeff.
Oh, hey guys!
Fancy
Didn't
me.
realize this was the Dunkin' Donuts that you hung out in.
It is.
We hop around. Actually, we get around, if you know what I'm saying, with our donuts. Well, what are the chances of us bumping into a genius like Geoff Engelstein though at Dunkin' Donuts? Jeff, have a seat.
Right. What are you enjoying today?
What do you got there?
The one true donut, chocolate glazed.
Well, that's an excellent choice.
Just finished my chocolate glazed, as a matter of fact. My son's favorite as well.
Now, my favorite is the glazed blueberry cake. Just saying. That's a tasty donut.
Hardly even a donut, really.
Oh,
it's like
tasty.
that's like a muffin in the wrong shape.
There's nothing wrong with making a muffin into a donut. Anyway, we're not here to talk about muffin-shaped donuts.
That's not why we're here today.
Really?
Today, we're going to talk about books.
Yes, more books.
Books are awesome, and we are bibliophiles.
Well, you'll be getting a lot of requests, Craig, on both the Twitter and the Facebook and the email.
Yeah?
People saying, hey, I'm just jumping into Audible, audibletrial.com/D6G, and I'm checking it out. And when I'm going in, I need some suggestions for books to read.
Yes.
And
we
so
have been getting those.
Now, long-time listeners will know, long-time Lost Chapter subscribers, such as yourselves, will know that back in Lost Chapter number 7, we sort of laid the groundwork. We went through some of our favorite sci-fi and humorous books of all times and kind of recommended those. And then back in number 9, we reviewed our favorite fantasy, horror, and supernatural books.
Right.
But we've been reading a lot since then.
We have.
And mentioned them here and there. We thought, let's compile a list, again, of more recently added books to our favorites list. Yep. And since we have Mr. Engelstein, who clearly does a lot of reading with us here today,
Yes.
you could
Most
jump right in here.
geniuses do.
Exactly. I mean, you can't be a genius and not read a lot.
That's right.
So Jeff, you can jump in here too and give us some great suggestions of what you've been reading as well.
And just for the record, when I was in college at MIT, I had I think the world's largest science fiction library.
That is awesome.
I spent a lot of time there pulling stuff off the shelves from all the way back, from the 30s and 40s to, the 80s when I was there. So I got an awesome grounding in the classics of the science fiction genre.
Nice. Now, I would expect nothing yet less from the university that puts a TARDIS on the roof once in a while.
That's right.
Excellent. All right. So what do you think, guys? Should we start with fantasy or sci-fi? What do you think?
Let's start with fantasy.
All right. So, Craig, how about you? What have you read since the last time we did this? What would you say is one of the now must-read or listen to or whatever fantasy books?
Interestingly enough, Russ, I would agree with you 100%. I think we've only read a few fantasy, and we both read them all. The same ones.
All of them. Everyone published. I've covered them all. I have not missed a book.
Let's start with The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss.
Oh, good choice.
We actually did a Lost Chapter book review on the King Killer Chronicles. Mm-hmm. We did it when the second book came out, right?
The first 2 books we've covered.
So the first 2 books, yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome characters, awesome plot. Nothing at all like Harry Potter.
Except for the parts that are.
Yeah, except for the parts that people
right.
make.
Except for he spends the whole time in the college of magic.
See, Jeff's in my book camp. I love
it. Last time we did this, I was outnumbered. I can't do this. I'm leaving Dunkin' Donuts.
Have you read these books, Jeff?
Yes, I read both of them.
And what did you think of them?
Yes.
I really he's a very good writer. I got a little bit concerned in the second book.
Why? I thought the second book was better than the first book.
I did.
Really?
Too.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seemed to me like he was, I got kind of the feeling I got when I was in the third book of Game of Thrones, which is like, he doesn't really know exactly where he's going on this, and he's just throwing stuff. It really felt a lot like padding it to me. It didn't feel like it was going. And then I heard he's just writing one more book. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little concerned that he's not going to be able to really pull it all together in a satisfactory way. I mean, it just seemed almost like more prologue in a way, the second book. But he's a very talented writer, and I enjoyed all the scenes, and there's a lot of cool set pieces and things like that. But I was just concerned that they weren't adding up to a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I would agree with I thought the weakest points for the second book were that two of the most action-packed moments in the entire story arc happened off stage.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, then it was that big gap, and he's like, all of a sudden, he's like vanishes, and then he reappears with a terrific story about what happened to him while he was gone.
Right. Oh yes, I could tell you about the pirates, but I'm not going.
Right. Yeah, there's all this detail about his travels. And then it's like this huge part where, yes, I sailed the seven seas like Sinbad. Now I'm back, and
like, oh, okay.
There's still to be some prequels.
And I could have done with less fairyland and more pirates. That's what I.
Yes, indeed.
But yet still, I would say. Great series, and I really still enjoy. I mean, the first book left me wanting nothing. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I didn't have a moment of doubt. But I would agree with Geoff that the second book left me with I'm a little nervous. I enjoyed it immensely. Don't get me wrong. I did not begrudge a moment of reading it. Yeah. But I was by the end, I was like, I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, and barring catastrophic reviews, I will certainly get and read the third.
Yeah, me too. And I think this is going to be, and like you say, Geoff, barring something catastrophically going wrong in the third book, this is destined to be one of those classic series that most folks who enjoy fantasy have read.
Right.
So I think if you are a fantasy fan and you have not yet read these books, you definitely want to check them out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I think you'll be I think the only reason we're expressing some disappointment is because he is such a good writer. It is unfortunate there are areas where it could have been so much better if.
Right. A little more plot and a little less time talking about how he figured out how to pay for college.
Right.
I mean, the vibe I was getting was a much older, more experienced author who's allowed a lot more leeway in his plotting.
Hey, speaking of older and more experienced authors.
Oh, Joe Abercrombie.
Yes. Now, so I was really high on the Kingkiller Chronicles, though, thinking like this is the best fantasy book I've read in a long time. But then I read First Law, the First Law series by Joe Abercrombie, and this book now, this series of books, which actually the official First Law series is 3 books, but there's actually a story arc of 6 books involving some of these characters from the first book in the trilogy all the way through the 6th book, and it is one of my favorite fantasy series of all times, possibly only exceeded by Lord of the Rings, simply because Lord of the Rings is one of the first fantasy books I ever read, and so it's got a special place in my heart. But this is a really good series by an amazing writer. I'm just really blown away by it.
I have sadly not read the next 3 books, mainly because of confusion of which one I was supposed to read next. I got one on Audible, and it wasn't the right one, and I was like, forget it, and I just went on to something else. And I will eventually go back and read the next 3 because I've heard amazing things. But what do these books not have? They've got character, they've got story, they've got an interesting, completely original twist. I mean, it's awesome because if you find online his own description of the First Law series, he'll basically outline like, oh yeah, what your normal epic fantasy has A, B, C, D, and E. And then he has A, B, C, D, and E, but every one of them is like this twisted, corrupted, bizarre version of A, B, C, D, and E, so that his story is completely unique and new and original, and you don't know who to trust, and you don't know who you're supposed to be rooting for. Sort of like Game of Thrones and the Song of Ice and Fire, but I thought in a more coherent format.
I was going to say this is Game of Thrones done correctly. Not to bust on Game. I know there's a bunch of haters now. I like Game of Thrones. Don't send me emails. But clearly, even the most ardent Game of Thrones fan will argue that some of the later books kind of lost their, will to advance the plot.
Right.
So these books really stay focused, and the characters are so good. It's like in Game of Thrones, there's characters you love to read about, like Tyrion, and there's characters you're like, oh crap, I got another chapter of this person.
Another chapter about this chick.
There is no bad character because
chick or man.
Right. When you get to First Law series, you're with one character the whole time, and you're like, this guy's great, and it shifts, and you're like, oh no, but then as soon as you're like, oh, but this guy's great too, and every single character is just so interesting that I just really, really loved it. So, Geoff, have you read any of these books yet?
I have not.
Oh,
these are ones that I might add to my list.
I would highly recommend them.
You know what I would not add to my list?
What's that?
Dance with Dragons.
Ooh, throwing Martin under the bus already.
Oh, I would add it to your list because you have to. Now you're so invested, you've got to read them as they come out.
Not me. I read book 4, and that was it. I have not read book 5.
Check,
I
please.
put it down.
Yeah.
I said, forget it.
I think you are a richer man than I.
I just read a very quick plot review to see if Daenerys was still on that
stupid
still across the sea,
Yeah.
or if she'd actually gotten off her ass and done something. And when I saw she hadn't, I was like, that's it. Enough is enough.
Yeah, we got to send an email to Martin saying, bring Daenerys home. Just send her postcards. Just flood them.
We need to like tie yellow ribbons around.
Make it happen, George.
Yeah, so I mean, what you've got there is, Russ, what you just said, we're willing to let the plot develop, or you said it in a much more erudite way. But the plot just languishes. For most of these characters, they're like literally ending the book where they began the book, in the same place, emotionally, physically. Those few who are moving are once again being abused by Martin.
The only thing that saves Dances with Dragons at all is that there's a lot of Tyrion in it.
There is, but that's what
fun.
I mean by abuse. That poor guy gets beaten severely by the fate stick.
It's the difference between. I mean, I like to differentiate these kind of things between a mini series and a soap opera. And a mini series, if it's done right, and that's why I think like a lot of these shows, like Lost, I think would have been better served if they knew in advance, like we're going to be 3 seasons and then we're done, and that's how we're going to script it and arc it. And and a soap opera, like General Hospital, they're just churning for stuff to happen, and I feel that, and it's also with the Name of the Wind. I kind of got that feeling also, but I totally feel that Game of Thrones has gone into soap opera territory, where the things are happening for the sake of things to happen, and you don't feel like you're moving towards something.
They're not serving a purpose anymore. Right?
Exactly. Right. And that's the concern. But I definitely want to read that other series, though. I mean, that certainly.
Joy Abercrombie, check it out, Jeff. You will not be disappointed. Now, that's unfortunately for me. That's it for fantasy. There hasn't been a lot of new fantasy I've been reading. Craig, how about you? Anything else?
No.
Jeff, any other fantasy we missed you've been reading lately?
Well, I read one that was actually recommended to me by my son called Mogworld.
Oh, what was that like?
It's by Yahtzee Crushaw. Mm-hmm. Who is the guy that does the Zero Punctuation webcast, apparently. And it's about an MMO written from the point of view of a minor character, an NPC basically inside the MMO. Oh, nice. And it's just a one-off book. It's real cutesy. It reminded me a lot of Red Shirts.
Yes. Yeah.
It was in that same kind of vein, with characters that are kind of minor characters in the story that are the main characters in the books, or and you know what I mean. So it was very cleverly done, and I enjoyed that a lot. A very quick read. It's not going to be a towering classic of the genre, but it was a fun little book.
Cool. Mogworld. All right. Check that one out.
But I mean, in terms of classics, since I didn't get to go back to, I wasn't around the last one. I mean, there's a couple of ones. If you're looking for a good old series to read, I'm actually reading right now. I'm going back and reading some of the short stories of Gene Wolfe, and he was most famous for, and this is kind of borders between fantasy and sci-fi, but it was the Book of the New Sun series. Started, the first one was Shadow of the Torturer.
Oh, yes.
That is an awesome series. And then he followed it up with another 3 or 4 book series after that, which was the Book of the Long Sun series, which is just his writing is just unbelievably good. He is just such a deep writer, and you've really got to focus on it. I mean, he's working on so many different levels at once, but it is so rewarding when it all really comes together. So the Book of the New Sun and the Book of the Long Sun are like 8 books in total that are just, I think, absolute towering achievements.
Cool. That sounds good. I'm putting that on my list here.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
Yeah. Awesome. And then some other classics, which I'm sure most of the listeners know, but just in case you haven't, the Thomas Covenant, The Unbeliever books.
Oh,
Lord Fowlsbane is the first one in that series. Yep. And just read the first 3. Stop there. There's like 5 others. Don't read them.
A huge
yes, do yourself a favor. Stop while it still doesn't,
Yes, just read the first 3. It's a trilogy. It ends. You're done. You don't have to read it. It becomes, again, self-indulgent stuff. I mean, I think there's a lot with these writers that reach this point where they just become beyond editorial control.
That's exactly how I.
Yes, Craig has waxed poetic on that in the past. Exactly right.
Yes.
And we actually had a listener who put together a giant musical montage of me going off about that. I felt that at the end.
And then especially the first book, I just have a soft spot in my heart for it, is the Sword of Shannara series.
See, now, you like Sword of Shannara?
Yeah.
The first one I like.
See, I couldn't. I had to put it down, Jeff, to be honest with you, because it was so much Lord of the like shot for shot Lord of the Rings.
Could be. I mean, I read it when I was I was in like 8th grade, 9th grade when I read it. So, it was maybe in a different, I wasn't as mature a reader as you were.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I was mature. I don't know if I was mature. I'd read Lord of the Rings like so many times when I was young for some reason. I don't know why, not just weird. I don't know. I liked it a lot. So, I don't know, Craig, did you like Shannara or no?
No.
All right.
Okay. Well,
I read all 3. I didn't put it down halfway through the first book, and I was very young also. I was in high school. I just wasn't getting like anything like new out of it. I felt like I was retreading old territory and
well, I just to make sure, I definitely read books that were like, I read Dragonlance and loved it, but that doesn't really stand up.
No, that does not. In fact, that shatters your childhood memories if you even try to reread them now.
Yeah, it's like watching Saturday morning cartoons again. Super Friends doesn't stand up either. Just saying.
No.
Oh, please. Super Friends stands up. Take that back.
Seriously? Now, maybe. Let's move on. All right, so,
I would certainly put Shannara in as a nostalgic pick.
Okay.
Because I mean, I did read it when I was younger, and I remember it fondly. I know there was like 12 in the series. I only read like the first 1 or 2. So
I would definitely say it has to be in there because
it's a classic.
As for every person that you find that didn't like it, you're going to find at least one person who did. It's it's like the Wheel of Time, really.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Science fiction. We've been reading a lot more of this lately. I'm not sure why that is, but we have been.
Mm-hmm.
You want to start this off, Craig? With
you open this one. I open.
All right. So this one is still being written. The first 2 books are out.
It came out. Oh, it came out yesterday.
Did it? Is it on Audible yet? Oh, I gotta go check. The Expanse series. So this is we talked about this on the show before. You might remember us mentioning Leviathan Wakes and Caliban's War. This is a series that I've said is kind of like Sedition Wars, the board game, because there's this sort of, right from the opening, this isn't a spoiler at all, there's some kind of like space, alien manufactured space virus thing that's sort of like able to mutate human bodies and turn them into goo and all of a sudden build its own stuff and become sentient. So that's the whole thing, but it's really good character writing that makes this book awesome.
Yeah.
The characters really evolve. You get to know them. You care immensely about them. It's also very much, which is interesting angle. The first book in particular is very much almost like a kind of a pulp detective book in a way, because one of the main characters is sort of a classic pulp detective, and yet here he is in a sci-fi setting, which is just unique too. Really fun. I really like these books. What do you think, Craig?
I loved them. Sadly, Abaddon's Gate, which is the 3rd book that did come out yesterday, is not yet available on Audible. But I don't usually like books that are like so hardcore sci-fi that you're worrying about, your Delta V and you're flipping over and there's no artificial gravity, and I'm sort of like more in the Star Wars space opera-y kind of.
Yeah, but you like Weber, and Weber's a bit like that too.
No, Weber's very much like that, but he has artificial gravity, and
right.
His kind of like a split the difference kind of guy.
Yep.
Whereas The Expanse is very much like
it's harder sci-fi
technology you can easily see from where we are today.
Yep.
And I love it. It is probably the first book that's managed to do that, other than like Heinlein, that's managed to do that, and I've just allowed myself or been sucked in completely and love it. The characters, again, I think that's a theme, isn't it? When we're talking about these books that we love, the characters are essential, and the characters in The Expanse are awesome. You feel for them when they get messed up. You feel for them when they get screwed over. The plot, however, is also awesome. So I would say The Expanse is without a doubt my favorite new sci-fi, or new to me sci-fi series.
Have you had a chance to dip your toe in that one, Jeff?
No, that's another one that's new to me. So I will definitely keep that one.
I think you cannot go wrong with that.
I don't think you'd be disappointed. Now here's one that's going to have mixed results. It's the Apotheosis series by S. Andrew Swan. And this one is almost like an older, more classic hard sci-fi in that I liked it because I liked the overall plot. But the characters were just so flat and so archetypal and so they never developed or changed.
Right. And I didn't really by the third book I was just like, okay, we see where this is going. Let's just finish it.
Yeah, but I had to finish it, but it got very hard sci-fi at the end too. Like it was very 2001 at the end. I mean, not the same ending, but sort of the same idea. And I liked it for what it was because it kind of gave me some old nostalgia for harder sci-fi, but I wish the characters were stronger. I don't know. Jeff, have you read this one?
Nope.
Or series? It's another trilogy. Anyway, it's worth a listen. Narrating's pretty good on Audible. It was a good one if you like that kind of thing, but it doesn't have the characters in depth that we've been.
Although he should really not do static with his voice when he's reading.
No, he should not.
Should not. Oh my god! I think I do it better than he does.
Here's one. This is sort of a classic that I finally discovered and read. Someone a local.
This is weird to me that you had not read this.
I know. So, Snow Crash, which is actually a classic written back in '92.
Seriously, you hadn't read Snow Crash?
I had not.
Oh my god!
Oh, I fell in love with it. Especially,
I read it in college as part of a course. That's how classic it is.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, when did you read Snow Crash, Jeff?
I read it pretty much right when it first came out. Maybe a year later.
What's interesting though is to read it now, and I don't know when the last time you reread it.
I went back and reread it. Yeah, he's got everything in there. I mean, it's like going back and reading. Oh God! Now the Gibson book. Never mind. Go ahead. I'll come back to
All right, Google that. So Snow Crash is...
It's this donut is just, all that sugar is
it takes the brain cells, just turn right off. So Snow Crash was written in '92, but it's basically... Neuromancer. Yes. Neuromancer, the classic, yes.
Yes.
But very predictive about VR worlds and people getting completely sucked in. And this is '92, and the internet was just sort of very, infinite in its infancy in terms of like public using it, right? And here he's got this thing that basically he describes in many ways WoW and other MMOs but much more immersive, but you can see very close to what we have. And a lot of technology, even just Wi-Fi, all these other things that are very ubiquitous. But really great story too. And great characters. I love the pizza, the pizza guy, yep. where pizza has become this like there's two things. What are the two things? Pizza and I can't remember the other thing. Two businesses left in the world, and the pizza's run by the mob. So you can make big money being a pizza delivery guy and just zipping around in cars. It's just interesting. Great book, fun read, really well written, very light. Not a very long book, but really good book.
Oh, and it just takes such crazy left turns here and there. It's like you do not see at all where that book is going to.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I from that book just like fell in love with the author on that, and I have gone with Neil Stephenson, and I've gone back and read a bunch of his stuff, and he's a little bit hit or miss. He had this. Speaking of self-indulgent, really long things, he had this 4-book series, the Quicksilver series, which I've tried to read so many times, and I just can't get past it, about the Newton and some of these other guys in this weird, slightly off-kilter version of the 1600s. Uh-huh. And some of his other stuff is just terrific, but certainly Snow Crash is phenomenal.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
I forced both my kids to read it.
There you go.
You will read this book now.
Yeah, it's a must read.
Yes.
Now here's a modern take a little bit on Snow Crash. It's not that old. Have you read Ready Player One, Jeff?
Oh, of course. I lived Ready Player One.
I know, right? So, Craig, did you finally read Ready Player One?
I did.
You did. So
I was in on finding that little dot thing on the Atari 2600. I wasn't like the first person to find it, but we found it, and I remember that was all happening.
I nailed Tomb of Horrors. Just saying, no spoilers, but I knew before it even happened. So Ernest Cline wrote this book. It is near future, kind of again really heavy VR. Less amazingly predictive than Snow Crash because he wrote this thing not that long ago. But what's cool about this book is the 80s has become sort of this worshipped decade due to this, mogul doing his little contest thing. And basically the main characters, so everybody knows the 80s and it's full of 80s references and it's this giant sort of Easter egg hunt to win this utopian prize of basically being the head of a major successful, basically Blizzard, if you will, because it's a company that just owns the virtual world. So really interesting read, great, really well written. And if you are a Will Wheaton fan, the book version on Audible is narrated by Will Wheaton, which is just sort of fun. So it's great times. And if you're a child of the 80s in particular, this is a must-read book.
Yes, very breezy read, very enjoyable. It just goes down easy.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nerdy references in there. Craig, some of them were very...
I'm sure I didn't get half
developer-centric, yeah.
It's all like computer...
But you have to be a computer guy. I mean, like there's references to Voltron in there, all kinds of crazy nonsense.
No. You get. There's more. I'm not the computer guy at all, to the point where like I didn't own a computer until I was in my mid-20s. But I enjoyed it thoroughly, and there was plenty of the Easter eggs in it that I got. So you do not have to be a Russ Wakelin
or a Geoff Engelstein
to this book. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, I graduated from high school in '82, so I was, right there in the '80s was the prime time for pop culture for me. So, and speaking of Mr. Wheaton, just to throw in a little fun factoid here, I don't know if you guys saw, but at Planet Comic-Con in St. Louis a couple of months back, they did a charity fundraiser event with Will Wheaton playing Space Cadets, and they raffled off tickets to play Space Cadets with Will Wheaton.
Nice.
So it was like $1 a ticket, and then they just drew 5 people at random, and he played the captain, I believe, and they raised like $3,000 or $4,000 for charity, which was pretty cool. So I sent him a copy, and he signed it back and sent it back to me. So it was very nice.
That's awesome.
That's awesome, Jeff. That's cool. That's a fantastic game too. I know we've reviewed it on the show, but you got a good one there. I can't wait to. And I played the dice game. Can't wait for that to come out now. The dice version of Space.
Gen Con.
I know.
Gen Con. Just saw the pictures of the actual dice. So
I'll be in line. I'll be in line at the Stronghold booth.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Next up is another one we talked about a little while ago, but I like this trilogy too. Troy Rising trilogy by John Ringo.
Yep.
Yeah, this is as Craig calls it, patriot porn. It's John Ringo's very pro. He's got a very certain political view that he's not afraid to kind of put out there, and it's good.
I would say he's like the most drastic one in that particular vein.
Yes, there are folks, of course, on the other side of the aisle that are just as drastic. John's one of the fewer ones on that side of the aisle.
Well, there's the one about the town that goes back in time. Which series is that?
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about? Where they just get transplanted to like medieval Germany, and then they pass all these American ideals and just convert Europe into this wonderland.
These guys are all they're all friends too.
Right.
Yes.
So this is
they do anthologies, and they all write in each other's universes. It's kind of
so this is sort of the sci-fi version of some of that, but it's also a little bit hard sci-fi, but it's in a good way. I think it's a lot of the things that he does. So basically, the premise in this series is that aliens show up. The first book is called Live Free or Die because in the very first book, the main character lives in New Hampshire. Yeah. And when the aliens show up, they come through a gate, and there's all kinds of different alien species checking out Earth, and one of them wants to subjugate the species. But if we could just find another species who would be willing to take us on as sort of a mentor, they would maybe defend us from these more invasion, warlike races. So not John Ringo, but the main character discovers that that this one trader species really likes maple syrup. It's sort of like a drug.
Rader.
Yes.
So
he so exactly. Unlike a diplomacy trader, more about that later. So he gives them this maple syrup. He starts selling it to them and making lots and lots of money. And by becoming this rich billionaire, he's then able to build out a defensive system for the world, basically. And he does it all in a very capitalistic way, which is why the patriot porn stuff, he does it all that way. But it's really interesting because of how they use lasers and sort of technologies that are not too far from being believable. There's no like warp drive or anything else like that. And it's really interesting how he does that too. So if you're really into sort of harder sci-fi, it's pretty good stuff.
There are warp gates.
Warp gates, right? But there's no artificial gravity. They got to spin thing.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's not that Star Trek Star Wars.
Well, I gotta say, on your recommendation, I read Live Free or Die.
What'd you think?
Well,
Did the Patriot
I enjoyed the first half.
Yep.
And I'm a hard sci-fi guy.
Yep.
I like that kind of stuff. I like my stuff really crunchy, but oh my gosh, he just totally lost me in the second half of that book when they're building this thing and then they're doing this. And it was just like, I felt like he had done all this backstory stuff. And wanted to see how clever he could be with putting this stuff together and felt that he needed to just vomit all that up onto the page instead of just, keeping it in the back of his head and just alluding to it here and there.
See, I like that stuff. It was very, kind of Tom Clancy to me, just very like technical. But I like,
yes,
yeah, I like that. But yeah, if you don't like that, that's a good caution, Jeff, because if you're not into that whole thing, like spinning up mirrors out of asteroids, you probably got like 2 chapters on exactly how they made the mirrors out of the asteroids.
Exactly right.
So if you like that kind of stuff.
I would say I'm between Russ and Jeff on this one because I noted it pulled me out of my willing suspension of disbelief those moments because I was just like, okay, I was like, okay, I'll get back into the story in a couple chapters, but I did find it jarring and a little like, is this really necessary to the plot? And he does that throughout. He's like, oh, now I've got a plan and I will bore out this hole here and it'll do this, that, the other thing. And it's neat. I mean, I see both sides because it's neat. Like I see Russ's point where it's neat to see how he's going to do that. And I think right. Jeff, you're exactly right. In his head, he's like, I know how this would work. And instead of just hinting and intimating, I'm going to show you piece by piece exactly how I would do this.
And every single big breakthrough, it's him. He's got this team of world famous scientists. They get stumped, and he walks in and. The main character says, well, why don't we just do this? And they're like, of course, that'll work. And they do it.
Protagonist,
like, okay.
Yeah, that's a little bit,
Well, there's a very Ayn Randian element to it where you've got this one Superman.
Oh, it's all bootstrapped up. Yeah, he's got to do it. He's got to bring everything up. Absolutely.
Right. It's all this one superhero guy.
It's the power of the individual. And that's that whole thing.
Oh,
yes. Yeah. So that's, go ahead, Craig.
Okay. No, I was just saying I enjoyed it, but with those caveats.
Yeah. So that's my sci-fi list. But anybody else got a few more they want to add here?
I've got 2 series, but they're going to be very quick. This one series was this Peter, Paul, Patrick, Simon, Steve.
That sounds like a music group.
Yeah. Well, no. The problem is that I can never remember this poor guy's name. And a quick email search did not help me out here at all. And I had it all in my head, and I was going to say something and apologize, and I don't know. Anyway, sorry again. But it's
just classic radio people,
right? It's good stuff.
At Adepticon, he recommended this book called Reality Dysfunction to me, which is by Peter F. Hamilton, and it's The Night's Dawn is the name of the trilogy. And I'm almost done with it now. I think I'm like at 86% on my Kindle. And I would say the first 40%, I almost put it down and didn't pick it up again. Mm-hmm. It's huge. It's epic in scope, and I had no idea where it was going. And there's like 3 characters that I really was engaged with and enjoyed their story, and I liked it a lot. And there were a bunch of characters I couldn't care less about, and they were all on this one planet, and they were all doing stuff that I didn't care about. And then like all these horrible things were happening to them, and I was like, why do we keep going back to that planet? And then they tie it all together, and instead of like it starts out, it's kind of like a combination of sci-fi and sci-fantasy. I mean, hard sci-fi, because you've got these like living spaceships, but they don't have the artificial gravity. So it's a very interesting world that he's created, universe that he's created. The characters are very interesting, although I mean very fully realized, but not equally interesting all the way across the board. And it gets very sort of fantasy in the second half. And I'm not going to give anything away. It's very bizarre to me. But now I'm engaged, and I'm like, oh crap! I kind of have to get the next book, which is a little alarming to me because when you look at it on Wikipedia, which I did today, trying to figure out like how I could talk about it without giving anything away, there's over 1 million words in the trilogy by the time he's done.
Wow!
So I'm like, wow, that's a lot of words. It's 3 books. Each book is over 1,000 pages.
Wow!
Oh my god!
So I'm like, that's a lot. That's a lot. I don't know where it's going to go next that's going to make it worth that. But at the same time, I'm intrigued enough now where I don't think I'm going to jump right to the next book. I think I'll read something between this one and the next one, and who knows if I'll pick it up. But I intend to right now. It's intriguing to me anyway. And then John Scalzi's The Old Man's War, which apparently I spoiled the last time I talked about it. So it's just a really cool book about old men.
There's not much to spoil, is there? Oh, about the fact that the way that they press them into service, that part.
Don't spoil it, Geoff.
Exactly. I'm just saying, that's all I'm saying.
Now, Geoff, have you ever read Reality Dysfunction?
I have not, but it sounds like it's right up my alley. So that's definitely one I have on my list.
I mean, he's created a huge, epic universe at the very least, and it's all interactive. And there's humanity is divided into two basic, almost two species at that point, where one is really embraced biological technology, and one has kind of embraced religion, which rejects biological technology. So I mean, it's really fascinating on a bunch of different levels. It's just that the plot to me was very plodding for that first 40%. Old Man's War I really enjoy, but it's not a huge in-depth, there's no deep philosophy going on. It's just intriguing.
I read Old Man's War and liked that too.
I'll have to check that out.
And the follow-up books, I've read Ghost Brigades and The Last Colony, which were basically, it's a trilogy about the same characters. And I have not read Zoe's Tale, which is kind of like the next generation of characters. And I read half of The Human Division when he was releasing a chapter. He was releasing a chapter a week. Right. And there's 13 chapters, and only by the halfway through, I did the math and went, I'm going to be paying a lot of money for this book, more than I would pay if I just got.
Well, I went all the way on Human Division. I did the 99 cents a week, and at first it was kind of fun. I mean, I liked it. I liked the serialization part of it. Just getting a little bit of a chunk and knowing each Tuesday, there was going to be a new section. You could read it very easily in an evening. But I felt that he did not exploit the medium. I thought that the book is basically very, very episodic, with every chapter is different characters. He takes a piece from here and a piece from there. And there's a couple of characters that come back through some of the chapters, but it's very, very choppy. And if I'm writing an episodic book and I want to make maximum advantage of it, I mean, I'm putting one of those cliffhangers at the end of every book, and I want to be invested in the characters and invested in the plot and say oh my God, what's going to happen next? And it wasn't like that. It was you open up the next chapter and it's just it's like a little mosaic. He's plucked a little piece of the story over here, and you never know what you're going to get. And it's like a little mini short stories, basically, that kind of fit together. And so and then it turned out at the end, and I'm not spoiling anything here, that it's not a whole book. He doesn't finish at the end. Turns out it's the first book in a trilogy, which I didn't know when I started, and he didn't tell anybody that, because it doesn't wrap up at the end. So I was very frustrated by that. But I like the episodic idea, but I don't think he took advantage of it the way that it could have, to really make people into it and not drop out like you did.
I would understand. I would agree with that one wholeheartedly, as somebody who's
Yes.
Right. Any other sci-fi? Geoff, you got any more recommendations on the sci-fi front?
Well, just stuff that I've read recently. Really the only one, I read Live Free or Die, which we talked about, but I read this book Wool. Yeah. If you're familiar with that, but it was a self-published thing. This guy just wrote it and kind of published it, I think, himself on Amazon initially as a short story, and then he expanded it into a novel, or maybe a novella. It's kind of a short novel, but it was very good. And I heard it became really popular, and it's actually been picked up for a movie.
Oh, wow.
But it's kind of this funky post-apocalyptic future deal. And the whole thing is about, kind of it gradually unpeeling the onion. So I'm not going to go into any details. But I really enjoyed it. It was, it got a little bit implausible at parts, but in general, it was very interesting and thought-provoking and well done. And that was Wool by Hugh Howey is the author.
All right.
And then the others are just, again, just some classics. I was looking at the list of things that you recommended last time, and there was a couple of other ones that I would definitely want to throw on that list for people that are looking for some good sci-fi. One is from Jack Chalker, the Midnight at the Well of Souls series.
Oh, yes.
And that's one that's made to be a game. A board game or a computer game or something. And I think it was an RPG, actually. But the premise there is that there's this one world where it's covered in these hexagonal pattern around the world. And inside each one, there's a different alien race.
Oh, wow.
And these people come in and they just start, you're not supposed to go in between the zones, but they start doing it. And, so the whole mystery is, what's the purpose of this planet? And, and and it all comes to that. So that's a very cool series of books. Pretty old and a little bit challenging to find. There may be some audio versions of those available, but that's a really fun one.
Cool.
I liked that a lot.
Another one, and this is super hard sci-fi for those of you that like that, is the Red Mars series by Kim Stanley Robinson, which is about the colonization of Mars, Red Mars, Blue Mars, and Green Mars. Think of the series, and that's about a group of colonists that are sent to Mars, never to return. I mean, they're purposely sent to establish a base on Mars, and just how the whole thing develops from there. And he's also a very good writer. And then the Riverworld series, which I think was turned into a TV miniseries at one point, wasn't it? By Philip Jose Farmer.
A very bad attempt by sci-fi.
Yeah, well, ignore the miniseries and read the books, because the books are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Where everyone that was ever born in history just wakes up on the banks of this giant river with these big food-giving mushrooms, and then hilarity ensues. And then the last one, which is a more recent one, is the Hyperion series by Dan Simmons, which is also very, very, very well written. It's about a far future thing where there's a lot of planets and they're all connected by these gates. But there's this one mysterious planet, Hyperion, with this being that appears that's covered in blades and knives and swords, and tends to kill people, and it becomes like this religious weird kind of a cult figure and a cult thing. And it's 3 or 4 books, very, very well written, very, very interesting. I wasn't 100% thrilled with the payoff, I felt, but the journey itself was just well worth it. So that is another one that I would really recommend if you haven't had a chance to take a look at Hyperion.
And that's exactly how I would have classified it as well.
Oh, cool.
Excellent journey. And the payoff was kind of like, okay.
Yeah, well, it was worth a trip. All right, cool. So we're running a little long, but I do want to sneak in a couple of books that would fall into the other category, neither sci-fi nor fantasy.
Right.
But there's some books there that either we didn't cover the first time that I thought we should mention, or whatever. So I got a couple. One is The Stand by Stephen King, which, of course, is a classic.
Yep.
I recently reread it again, just out of the blue. I just grabbed an Audible and listened to it, which is, that's a lot of audio entertainment for one credit.
That's a lot of hours.
One credit. That's a lot of audio. But fantastic book, arguably one of his best, if not his best work. Just a really good read. And if you have not read The Stand before, or if you haven't read it in a while, definitely worth sitting down.
I'm not a big Stephen King fan, and I loved The Stand.
Yeah, good story. Jeff, you read The Stand?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that.
A given.
Wholeheartedly.
And then another one, a series that we read, I think since we did our other episodes, was the Leviathan, Behemoth, Goliath series by Scott Westerfeld.
Awesome steampunk stuff.
Now, this is very steampunky, and it's definitely targeting the young adult / juvenile reader.
Thank you.
But I enjoyed it. I thought it was as well written as Rawlings stuff. I thought it was really, really good. I liked the story. I liked the plot. I liked the visuals in my head, and it was right. I was reading it right at the time of my Dystopian Wars fetish.
Yep.
So it fit right in with that nicely. It's very Dystopian Wars. Very Dystopian Wars.
Yes.
So, Jeff,
Awesome.
have you read these?
I read Leviathan. I just read the first one. I didn't read the other ones, but I certainly enjoyed it.
Yeah, they're fun. It actually gets better. I think that each book is progressively better. I think.
I do think that as well.
Okay.
It's kind of like Potter in that the characters grow up, and it feels like the writer does too a little bit. Maybe he's not necessarily evolving as a writer, but just making it more, assuming his readers are getting older as they read or something. I don't know, but it gets better.
It does evolve. I felt.
Those are my two. What do you guys got?
I would go with the Iron Druid series by Kevin Hearn, which is think Jim Butcher if you don't have any Jim Butcher books to read currently.
Okay.
Finished everything by Jim.
I read the first 2 books in that series, and I think Jim Butcher should show up on this guy's doorstep with a cease and desist order.
Yes. I think he was like, "Oh, Jim Butcher's done it. How can I do it?" And he's like weaving in mythology and Celtic myth and like just bending over backwards to not be Harry Dresden.
Does he drive a Yugo instead of a VW Beetle?
Yeah, no.
Is that blatant? No.
I don't think it's that blatant, but it is. It's very much like I'm going to take what he's done and consider it a genre.
I see.
But, so I mean, I don't think and to be blunt, I don't think it's even in the same ballpark as Jim Butcher, who is by far one of my favorite authors. But it is entertaining. and I enjoyed it for the most part. Monsters Inc. is something that that's actually very much not Monsters Inc. What is
it a movie?
Monster Hunter International. Sorry.
I thought you were going for the novelization of Monsters Inc.
I was going to say there's a easy reader version of that at Barnes & Noble.
By Larry Correia. Monster Hunter International. That is more patriot porn. And that's very much, it's a modern times and monsters are real and the government has its own organization for dealing with it. But of course the government can do nothing correct because they're all incompetent boob bureaucrats. And so independent contractors are the way to go. And so there's a very political message there also, but not as over the head with a 2x4 as some other authors we may have mentioned earlier. And again, that's not like great literature, but it was a great read. I enjoyed it immensely. And then I'm rereading the Aubrey Maturin series by Patrick O'Brien, which is awesome if you are into or engaged in the Age of Sail in any way.
I love these books. This is one of my favorite series also, although I will caution, I actually prefer it over Horatio Hornblower.
Yeah.
Although I like Hornblower a lot. But it is also kind of like we're talking about hard sci-fi. This is hard nautical reading.
I mean, it absolutely is.
Very technical. If you
hard
like,
sci-fi.
Yeah, exactly. If you like your weather gauge and your various knot types and how to set the mainsail, you will like these books. But there is quite a few pages dedicated to that kind of stuff.
Yes, there is. So, I mean, and we might as well jump in there.
Yeah, I got to read those. I haven't read those, but yeah. I really like Moby Dick, which is somebody's kind of similar-ish with all the nautical stuff. So
yes. There you go.
Yeah. Well, so I'm reading those right now. I am a big Hornblower fan, although I'm enjoying immensely the Aubrey Maturin series. And I need to do this because we don't do it usually, and I'm not going to do it on the main show because I don't want to be super public about this. Mm-hmm. But right now I'm listening to BioShock Rapture, and they call it BioShock Book 1, which to me is a horror. This is without a doubt the worst book I have encountered in years.
Wow. What makes it bad?
It is the characters. I mean, first of all, it's based on a video game.
Right. So that's they got a big hurdle to climb right there.
So they're limited by that. My opinion of the whole BioShock universe has gone down immensely just from reading this.
Oh, it's a shame. I mean, that's really bad.
And I don't think that's fair. I think that I think this guy is just the plot structure is very basic and childish. The writing is painful to get through at times, like a bathysphere frothing. No, I would say the water around the bathysphere might froth. I somehow doubt that the bathysphere itself is going to froth. It's stuff like that. I mean, just really redundant, like the same word 3 times in one sentence kind of thing. Just very, very painful. The characterization is painful. It is so purple in sections. I mean, it's just like the orbs of her eyes flared with emotion. And you're like, what? And then you've got 2 hours of sort of Disney-esque language and then 3 F-bombs in a row. So you're like, well, I don't understand. And this guy fancies himself a political theorist and a political philosopher and thinks that what he's doing is setting up a huge straw man argument against Ayn Rand's objectivism. But what he's showing is that he's completely ignorant of Ayn Rand, in my opinion. And it's just like, it's like, I'm going to spend 2 chapters telling you that this industrialist is the greatest guy. And then the rest of the book showing you how he's evil. And he hates God. And he hates charity. And he hates children. I mean, it literally gets to the point where he hates children. And, of course, there's this socialist who's, who loves children, and she's going to change everything and turn everything around. And I'm just like, you need to stop hitting me over the head with this.
So it's seriously. The opposite of patriot porn.
It is exactly.
It's socialist porn.
I'm getting, I've got that mentality where I have to finish whatever it is I'm starting book-wise, and I'm really resentful right now. And this is one of the books I got for $5 on Audible. So it's not like I spent even a full credit or even 1/3 of a credit. But I'm just ridiculously resentful right now that I have like 2 more hours of this that I have to sit through.
That's a shame because there are some good video game books out there. That, like,
there absolutely
the
are.
Mass Effect and Halo books are readable. They're fun.
Yes, they were. Yeah. My only argument against the Mass Effect ones was that it didn't follow the actual plot of the game, which is awesome. It follows like little mini plots between each game, like. Whatever. And then Halo did kind of the same thing, but the books themselves were very entertaining, which is why I thought this would be safe, because we talked to Colby about it, and you and I talked about it, and I was really intrigued by the whole universe, and I jumped on it. That was the first book I got in that sale on first series books. And I'm just like, oh my God, I feel numb.
It's a shame.
Well, I have a general policy that there's so many good books out there that I do not read novelizations of movies, video games, any of that stuff.
That's probably smart.
Which is why I have yet to read Settlers of Catan, the book. Which does exist.
I know.
Oh, it
does.
It's
a real book. Yes.
That is awesome.
There is a novelization of Settlers.
I will avoid that too. Although I'm sure there's some excellent political theory presented within.
Yes.
Right. Oh my God. They sell it at Walmart.
All right. Jeff, you got any others you want to stick in here before
I've got two random ones. One is the book House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski, which I'm sure saying that incorrectly, but this is it's a modern book, but it's about this family that moves into, it's kind of horror-ish, but it's both psychological and there's a lot of layers to it because you got to read it, but it's about a guy watching a videotape about a family, and then somebody's writing about the guy's experiences. It's very meta, but cool. It's basically about a family that moves into a house, and they realize the house, when they measure the rooms and add them together, it's like 6 inches larger on the inside than it is on the outside.
Oh, cool! I love that kind of stuff.
And then things start to go horribly.
So kind of like Twilight Zone type stuff.
Yeah, but it's really dense, and but if you like that kind of thing, it's an awesome read.
I'll check that out.
And then the other one, which I consider, I just had to throw on here. It's not a novel. This is firmly in the nonfiction category to a certain extent. But one of the great geek/nerd books, and one of the real formative books for me growing up, was Gödel Escher Bach by Douglas Hofstadter. Ooh. And that is about math and music and art and how they all come together in so many different ways, and computers and Greek mythology, and it's just a tour de force. It came out, it won the Pulitzer Prize, and he came out of nowhere. Douglas Hofstadter at that point had been laboring on this book for like 15 years, and then finally dumped it on an unsuspecting world. And if you have not read that one, it's awesome. But that one you have to read in print, because the whole way it's typeset and everything else is all meaningful as part of the book. So you gotta get a print copy of it. They don't even have it on the Kindle or anything like that.
I'll have to check that out. That sounds excellent.
Yes.
Great. Well, Jeff, thanks for joining us here in Dunkin' Donuts today.
Thank you. I really appreciate just bumping into you guys randomly like this. It was quite a coincidence.
It's
I just happened to be sitting here thinking about these lists of books that I might be interested in.
I'm glad you were, and you had written it all, typed it all up and everything. So it's excellent to see you, and we'll have you on the show here. I'm looking forward to talking to you again in about a week or so about I don't know, maybe comic books or something. We'll think of something to talk about.
We'll come up with something.
All right, great.
I think we should do a whole comic book episode.
Ooh, excellent. Write that down.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.
Check one. All right, Craig, go ahead.
Shaquan.
Great. All right.